All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts, the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Race communism theory, rewriting history in bad faith to attack America, written by Conrad Riker. Available now. Links in description. The Bolshevik in your bedroom, how race communism hijacked female nature to enslave men, and the trivium to reclaim the West. You have been betrayed by a culture that has sold you a lie, trading the transcendent good, true, and beautiful of Western civilization for a neurotic grievance, and it is time to sharpen your mind against the assault. We are living under the specter of what I call race communism theory, a bad faith rewrite of history that rebrands failed Marxist class struggle into racial and gender conflict solely to destabilize the logos and make you apologize for the virtues that built the greatest cultures on earth. Look at the revisionism in our schools. It is argumentum ad hominem against the dead, attacking the character of Western heroes to avoid the substance of their achievements, turning the grammar of history into a weapon against the men who invented it. This rot has crawled into your living room, manifesting when a woman pretends to get frustrated over something small, a trivial argument that is actually a shit test designed to shift the frame of reality and induce guilt for crimes you did not commit. It is the same mechanism used by the state, which demands you provide without influence, extracting your resources like a Leninist commissar to fund a lifestyle you have no say in, effectively turning men into tax mules for a system that despises them. I am going to show you how to weaponize the trivium, to use grammar to identify the dogmas, logic to dismantle the fallacies of the woke, and rhetoric to humiliate the pathological altruists into silence. We will dissect the evolutionary biology of the toxic feminine and expose how the modern welfare state is merely an alpha transferring your resources to the very elements testing your frame. If civilization requires hierarchy and competence, and leftism demands equity, then leftism is the negation of civilization, and I am here to ensure you reject the blue pill of ignorance. We are going to smash the brutalist architecture of modern socialism and revive the living spirit of the West by becoming the serious men who make future plans instead of adjusting our pace to the volatile emotions of the mob, the specter of race communism and the death of the logos. I walked onto a modern university campus recently and found myself surrounded by thousands of young adults, ostensibly the educated elite of the next generation, yet not a single one could explain the basic syllogism to me. They could recite the catechisms of oppression, list the grievances of the perpetually aggrieved, and perform the ritual shaming of the West with practiced precision, but ask them to define grammar, logic, or rhetoric, the sacred trivium that built the cathedrals of the human mind, and you are met with a vacuous stare. This is not an accident. It is the calculated result of a decades-long infiltration by the Frankfurt School and their ideological heirs. They did not merely enter the academy to teach, they entered to lobotomize. They replaced the trivium, the method for discerning truth, with critical theory, a mental virus designed solely for deconstruction. Where logic once demanded evidence and valid inference, critical theory demands lived experience and emotional testimony, rendering a generation incapable of distinguishing fact from feeling. They have churned out graduates who are mentally armed only with the tools of demolition, unable to build a house, fix an engine, or even formulate a coherent argument without collapsing into a puddle of subjective relativism. This is the death of the logos, the divine spark of reason, replaced by the flickering chaos of unbridled emotion and leftist dogma. This intellectual suicide is the engine of what I call race communism theory, a concept so brazen in its dishonesty that it would make Machiavelli blush. We are witnessing the desperate flailing rebranding of failed Marxist class struggle into racial and gender conflict, because the economic proletariat never rose up in the West as Marx predicted. Instead of accepting that their theory was garbage, the leftists simply swapped the bourgeoisie for the white male, pivoting from a war on capital to a war on existence itself. They are rewriting history in bad faith, attacking the very foundations of America by claiming that every institution, every law, and every norm is structurally designed to oppress based on immutable characteristics. This is not history. It is a conspiracy of lies intended to destabilize the West. They cannot debate the merits of free market capitalism or individual liberty, so they attack the people who built it, fabricating a narrative of perpetual victimhood to justify the seizure of power. It is a theft of the future by falsifying the past, a demonic inversion of reality designed to turn the strengths of Western civilization, its meritocracy and its high-trust social capital, into liabilities. We must ask ourselves, with the cold, dissective scalpel of evolutionary biology, why Western men are so susceptible to this psychological parasitism. It is the curse of the pathological altruist, a trait hardwired into the genetics of high-trust, high-cooperation populations that built the modern world. In the ancestral environment, cooperation within the tribe was survival. But this instinct has a massive bug in the modern digital age. It is easily hacked by the con artist. The leftist ideology functions exactly like a social parasite. It mimics the signals of virtue, empathy, pity, social justice, to trigger the altruistic response of the white Western male, causing him to open the gates of the city to the very barbarians who wish to burn it down. This is the cuckoldry of the civilization itself. We are biologically programmed to feel guilt when accused of failing the tribe, and these liars have weaponized that feedback loop, constantly accusing us of oppression until we hand over our resources, our dignity, and our future in a futile bid to make the screaming stop. It is a predatory evolutionary strategy, and we are the herding animals being fattened for the slaughter. One of the most amusing yet sorrowful displays of this psychological combat is the awakened linguistic reversal, a semantic trick that would be humorous if it weren't so harmful. They have taken the English language, the most accurate instrument for philosophy ever created, and twisted it into a tool of manipulation. Consider the term equity. In a rational world, equity means ownership of shares. In the leftist vocabulary, it means theft. It is the compulsory redistribution of assets from the capable to the incapable, justified by a system of emotions. Then there is inclusion, which apparently means welcoming people, but in reality operates as the exclusion of the capable. We observe this in corporate diversity appointments where the pigmentation or the genetic makeup of the applicant outweighs their skill to program, compose, or manage. They use terms like violence to signify disagreement and silence to signify complicity, producing a distorted reflection of existence where right is wrong and the incapable are the targets of the capable. It is a verbal confinement constructed to prevent you from even considering forbidden ideas because you miss the vocabulary to convey them. To maintain this facade, the left relies exclusively on the argumentum ad hominem, for their actual theories are made of tissue paper and spit. Watch them try to debate a man like Thomas Jefferson or Christopher Columbus. They never attack the substance of the achievements, such as the formulation of natural rights or the navigation of the Atlantic. No, they attack the character. They point out that Jefferson owned slaves or that Columbus was a man of his time, effectively saying, because this man was not a 21st century social worker, his ideas are invalid. It is a coward's dodge, a way to avoid engaging with the towering intellects of the Western Canon by dragging them down into the mud of modern moral relativism. They cannot refute the logos of the Declaration of Independence, so they smear the finger that held the pen. This is the rhetorical strategy of the red-pilled man. Ignore the slander, weaponize the historical record, and hold the line. We know that the West is not defined by the sins of its ancestors, but by the transcendent truths they discovered, truths that the left seeks to bury under a mountain of guilt and shame. We can cut through all this noise with a simple, undeniable syllogism of destruction. If civilization requires hierarchy to function, someone must lead, someone must follow, and competence must be rewarded over incompetence, and leftism demands total equity and equality of outcome regardless of effort or talent. Then leftism is by definition the negation of civilization. This is the mathematical formula for the fall. You cannot have a functioning power grid or a space program based on equity. You get it based on physics, math, and competence. When you inject the leftist demand for equality of outcome into a system that requires inequality of merit, the system crashes. It is inevitable. It is physics. This is why the Soviet Union collapsed and why the modern West is crumbling beneath the weight of its own debt and social discord. The leftists are not reformers. They are demolition experts, tearing down the hierarchy that sustains them. Like a man sawing off the branch he is sitting on while screaming equity. To understand what we are losing, you only need to look at the architecture. Compare the soaring Gothic cathedrals of Europe, stone hymns to the logos, pointing the soul upward toward the divine, and the beautiful, with the brutalist, soulless, concrete structures of modern socialist realism. The cathedral says, man is capable of transcendent greatness and connection to God. The concrete block says, man is a biological unit to be housed and processed. This contrast is the physical manifestation of the living spirit of the West versus the dead materialism of the left. The West gave birth to the greatest cultures in the known universe because it celebrated the beautiful and the true. The left offers you gray paint, gender-neutral bathrooms, and a life of safe, mediocre servitude. They hate the cathedral because it reminds them of what they are not: creators of beauty, defenders of the faith, inheritors of a tradition that dwarfs their petty grievances. We must return to the grammar of history to defeat this. The 1619 Project and its ilk are not history, they are propaganda, a frantic attempt to paint the American founding as inherently evil rather than transcendent. The remedy for this is the primary source. Read the letters of the Founding Fathers, read the transcripts of the Constitutional Convention. You will find men of profound virtue, wrestling with the contradictions of their time while laying the groundwork for a system that would eventually dismantle the very evils they were trapped by. They did not create a perfect union, but they created a perfect mechanism for self-improvement. The left ignores this mechanism, focusing only on the starting line rather than the trajectory of progress. They want you to believe that, because the race started slow, the runner is worthless. We must reject this. We must use the facts, the dates, the documents, and the logic of the Western Canon to refute these lies, showing that the history of the West is not a story of oppression, but a heroic struggle to actualize the transcendental values of the good, the true, and the beautiful. Finally, we must smash the leftist claim that Western prosperity is solely the result of exploitation, a logical fallacy known as post hoc ergo propter hoc. They argue that because colonization happened and the West became rich, the former caused the latter. This ignores the massive explosion of innovation, technology, and social capital that occurred within the West. You do not get the Industrial Revolution from stealing gold. You get it from centuries of accumulated knowledge, rule of law, and a culture that rewards risk-taking. If exploitation were the secret sauce, then Rome would have invented the steam engine and the Aztecs would have landed in Madrid. The wealth of the West is the result of cognitive horsepower and a Protestant work ethic, not theft. To claim otherwise is to rob the ancestors of their credit, and to rob the present generation of the dignity of their achievements. We are the inheritors of a legacy of giants, and we will not let a cabal of bitter, envious leftists rewrite our history to justify our destruction. We stand with the Logos, armed with the truth, and we will not back down. The war for the Logos is not merely fought on the grand stage of history. It is waged in the trenches of the living room, where the same corrosive logic of grievance and inversion is weaponized against the masculine will. We have seen how the leftist manipulates external reality to induce guilt. But this tactic finds its ultimate expression in the feminine dynamic, where loyalty tests and manufactured crises serve as the engine of domestic control. We must now examine the battlefield of the home, where the feminine imperative attempts to dethrone the patriarch through the psychological guerrilla warfare known as the shit test. The domestic red witch shit tests as totalitarian control. Friedrich Nietzsche remarked that the true man wants two things, danger and play, yet he overlooked the third requirement: a domestic tyrant demands your submission. We occupy a time where the intellectual battlefield has breached the living room, and the primary weapon is not a blade, but the shit test. This serves as the tool the female imperative uses to probe the male frame for cracks, and without comprehending it, you are fated for servitude. I remember a distinct event I labeled the milk and bread situation, which demonstrates the sheer madness of this totalitarian control. The order was simple: procure milk and bread. I executed the mission with military precision, bringing back the required items. Yet, upon setting the bag on the counter, I received no gratitude, but rather a look of absolute disdain. The offense? I had bought 2% milk instead of skim, and white bread instead of wheat. Instantly, the atmosphere transformed from a peaceful domestic evening into a Stalinist show trial. The issue was never the carbohydrates. It was a judgment on my worth, a manufactured crisis intended to see if I would apologize for a crime that never existed. When a woman demands you adjust to her pace, she is asking you to slow your purpose to accommodate her emotional volatility. This is framed as consideration, but it is actually submission. You are moving at the speed of logic and necessity, the masculine drive to build, conquer, and secure, while she is operating in the realm of shifting moods. If you slow down, you are trading your destiny for her comfort. This is the toxic feminine in action, a psychological profile rooted in the evolutionary biology of hypergamy. In the ancestral environment, women had to test male resource security and commitment constantly to ensure they weren't investing in a loser. Today, this manifests as a series of constant, often trivial loyalty tests designed to weed out weak men. Research on strategic interference confirms that female psychology is wired to test male resolve through conflict. If you fold, you are genetically discarded. The tragedy is that the modern man walks into this meat grinder armed only with logic, while his adversary is wielding raw emotion. When the screaming starts over the wrong brand of cereal, he attempts to use logos facts, reality, the truth of the transaction. She, however, is operating in the realm of pathos. This is the trap. Arguing with a woman in a shit test scenario is a logical fallacy, an appeal to emotion where she creates the conflict to measure your frame, not to resolve a dispute. The mechanism here is pretending to get frustrated over something small, a sophisticated form of gaslighting designed to shift the frame of reality and induce male guilt. By feigning outrage over a minor error, she forces you to validate her reality, and if you apologize, you accept the premise that you are the problem. This creates the simp, the useful idiot of the matriarchy, who fails these tests by belittling himself. He apologizes for the milk. He agrees that he is thoughtless. He is the beta provider who seeks sex through provision, mistakenly believing that his resources are the price of admission for intimacy. Contrast this with the alpha lover who understands that provision is merely a byproduct of his competence, not the currency of affection. The simp enables the gynocentric power structure by refusing to hold frame, reinforcing the lie that men must atone for their existence. We must weaponize rhetoric to identify and verbally disarm these conspiracy of lies. You do not argue with the hurricane, you build the shelter. You reject the feminization of your spirit as the weakness it is, presaging the fall of civilization itself, and you stand firm in the stoic, undeniable truth of your own worth. We must recognize that the toxic feminine is not merely a dating hazard, but the operating system of the modern state. That shit test is the psychological prototype for the welfare state. It is the demand for provision without gratitude, weaponized by bureaucrats instead of lovers. We have transitioned from the microcosmic theft of dignity in the living room to the macrocosmic confiscation of property in the courtroom, and the logic remains identical: the parasitic state, Leninism in the living room. When the Bolsheviks seized the means of production, they didn't just confiscate factories, they seized the human soul by dismantling the family unit, declaring that the state, not the father, was the true protector of the child. Look at the family court industrial complex today, and tell me we are not living in the aftermath of that same vile ideology. It is a systemic looting operation, a mirror image of the Red Terror, but administered in fluorescent-lit rooms by bureaucrats who view men as nothing more than wallets with legs. We see fathers stripped of their children and assets, not because they are unfit, but because the system has been rigged to view the father as an unnecessary obstacle to the transfer of wealth. This is the cold, hard reality of the parasitic state. It uses the force of law to sever the bond between man and kin, turning the breadwinner into a serf who serves the state and the mother, receiving only contempt in return. This brings us to the central economic fraud of our time, a twisted application of the Marxist maxim, from each according to his ability, to each according to her need. The modern state has positioned itself as the ultimate alpha in the room, a brutal proxy that stands between men and the women they are tricked into supporting. The state demands men produce, innovate, and toil, exercising their ability, and then siphons off that vitality to redistribute it to women based solely on their declared need, all without requiring a shred of loyalty, grace, or femininity in return. It is a grotesque parody of the family unit, where the father is replaced by a faceless bureaucracy that taxes his breath to fund the very destruction of his own authority. We are constantly bombarded with the image of the fierce, independent woman, a cultural archetype that collapses under the slightest weight of logical scrutiny. This figure demands total financial autonomy, yet simultaneously demands the state, which is funded almost entirely by male taxpayers, provide for her birth control, her health care, her safety, and her sustenance. It is a cognitive dissonance of staggering proportions. She claims to need no man while reaching her hand deep into the pocket of the collective male workforce. If she were truly independent, she would be in the wilderness chopping wood and purifying water, not voting herself a raise from the treasury of male labor. The statistical reality is brutal and undeniable when one bothers to look. We can observe the massive gender disparity in taxation versus government spending. Men pay the vast majority of net taxes. Women consume the vast majority of welfare resources. The state has effectively become a substitute husband, offering security and resources that historically required a woman to maintain a marriage and exhibit virtue. But unlike a biological husband who demands partnership and loyalty, the state requires nothing but her vote. It is a one-way transaction, a gynocentric pump that extracts male vitality to subsidize choices that destabilize the civilization men built. This mechanism incentivizes the betaization of the West, a deliberate cultural poisoning where socialism encourages the absolute worst manifestations of female hypergamy. By stripping away the necessity of the male protector, the physical and economic bulwark against the world, the state allows women to chase the top 1% of genetic dominance without any consequence for her behavior. She is free to ride the cock carousel in her youth, secure in the knowledge that the state will steal from the boring, hard-working beta male to fund her later years. This breaks the social contract. If the state protects her, she owes no loyalty to the man who builds the infrastructure, leading to a collapse in pair bonding and birth rates. Let us dismantle the favorite economic lie of the left, the gender pay gap. This is not a gap in justice. It is a gap in choices, yet it is weaponized through the logical fallacy of equivocation, using the same word to describe two completely different things to confuse the low-information voter. When they say pay gap, they want you to think of unequal pay for equal work, which is illegal and virtually non-existent. In reality, the statistic reflects the choice gap, where men overwhelmingly work longer hours, more dangerous jobs, and higher stress positions to maximize earnings. Feminists use this statistical distortion to justify the further extraction of male resources, ignoring the brutal reality that men make up over 90% of workplace fatalities. They do not want equality, they want the fruits of male sacrifice without the cost. This entire nightmare finds its roots in the evolutionary biological imperative hijacked by leftist ideology. Women are evolutionarily hardwired to seek security and provision. a drive that once served to bind the family together by motivating women to seek high-status male partners. Marxism, in its infinite malice, tapped into this instinct and scaled it up to the political level. They convinced women that the state is the ultimate tribal leader, the ultimate protector, rendering the individual man obsolete. This is why leftism is so effective at recruiting women. It speaks to a primitive part of the brain, promising safety from a made-up patriarchy while delivering her into the hands of a much more abusive master. Lenin understood that to control the future, you had to monopolize the upbringing of the next generation. By dismantling the Russian family and removing the father's authority, he cleared the path for the state to become the only parent. We see the exact same playbook in action today. The welfare state has replaced the father, turning men into tax mules and sperm donors rather than kings of their own castles. The state does not want fathers. Fathers are dangerous because fathers teach independence and virtue. The state wants subjects, and the best way to get them is to sever the link between men and their sons. So, what is the remedy for a man who sees the game as rigged? We must adopt the strategy of going Galt. We must legally minimize our contribution to a system that hates us. This is not about laziness, it is about rational self-interest in an irrational system. Why produce excess value for a parasite that will only use it to dismantle your culture? Embrace financial minimalism. Invest in yourself and your own kin, not the tax coffers. Become an entrepreneur, not just a wage earner. Because the independent man is the only man the state cannot easily plunder. We starve the beast of our talent and our toil, withdrawing our consent until the parasite withers on the vine, clearing the way for a return to a civilization where virtue is rewarded and the truth is the only currency that matters. The architects of this decline rely on your temporal blindness, counting on you to remain fixated on the trivialities of the now, so you never notice the chains they are fastening around your future. They have hijacked the biological reward systems of men to keep us docile, replacing the glory of building civilization with the hollow pursuit of validation, turning us into mere resources for a state that despises our strength. We must dismantle this illusion with the ruthless application of the trivium, stripping away the comforting lies of the collective and reclaiming the primal duty to forge a legacy that outlasts our own mortality. Only by abandoning the juvenile obsession with the immediate can we apply the proper measure to a man's soul, the architect of reality, logic, rhetoric, and the future. I measure a man not by his height or his bank account today, but by the length of his time horizon. The modern world is a casino designed for the dopamine-addicted fool who lives in the perpetual now, chasing the next hit of validation, porn, or cheap sugar. But the serious man, the man who understands the architecture of reality, looks forward 10, 20, 50 years. He understands that he is a link in a chain of ancestors and a bridge to descendants. He builds not just for his own comfort, but for the legacy of his blood and the civilization that birthed him. This is the first step out of the cave, realizing that if you do not design your future, a gynocentric system that loathes you will design it for you, and you will be the worker ant in their colony, stripped of your surplus and your dignity. I once watched a dormant Rust Belt town undergo a quiet, bloodless revolution that the media refused to cover because it did not fit their narrative of victimhood. A group of men, disillusioned by the lies of the corporate HR departments and the family courts, decided to sever the cord. They returned to the Western Canon, reading Marcus Aurelius and Aquinas not in universities, but in basements and garages. They built local businesses that refused to bend the knee to diversity mandates. And they raised their sons with stoic discipline and a love for logic. Within 5 years, the local gender studies department shuttered its doors for lack of interest, and the divorce lawyers went hungry because these men refused to marry under the state's corrupt terms. It was a red pill renaissance, proof that when men withdraw their compliance, the parasite of leftism withers and dies on the vine. The system screams about toxic masculinity to distract you from the real epidemic killing the modern male: toxic compliance. This is the pathological weakness where a man surrenders his sovereignty to a gynocentric framework that despises his nature. apologizing for his testosterone and his ambition while handing over his resources to a machine that views him as a beast of burden. There is no courage in following the rules of a game rigged against you. There is only the dull ache of spiritual castration. We must stop treating the feminist narrative as a legitimate philosophy and see it for what it is: a control mechanism designed to domesticate the alpha into a beta worker drone, shaming you for your natural drive to conquer and build. Constructing a stable society is impossible when guided by a philosophy grounded in nihilism, a truth that remains the central decay within Marxism and feminism. These frameworks act as engines of disorder, offering no structural design for the future, but merely a scheme to wreck the present. Driven by resentment and the seizure of assets, they fail to grasp that a lasting culture requires planting trees whose shade the sower will never enjoy. The leftist mentality struggles to visualize the future because it is overwhelmed by current jealousy. It aims to dismantle the existing order instead of ascending through it. This leads to an unavoidable breakdown where construction stops, innovation dies, and everyone suffers in the name of fairness. To survive this spiritual war, you must wield the transcendentals, the good, the true, and the beautiful, as a shield against the ugliness of cultural Marxism. Seeking the good means embracing virtue and hierarchy over the moral relativism that excuses female promiscuity and male weakness. Seeking the true means accepting the cold, hard facts of biological reality, such as the statistical reality that men commit suicide at nearly 4 times the rate of women in the West, a tragic toll of the alienation this system breeds. Seeking the beautiful means rejecting the modern art of decay and restoring the aesthetic of strength and order. When you align yourself with these eternal principles, the chaotic noise of the leftist media becomes a distant, irrelevant buzzing. The remedy for this sickness is not found in compromise or debate, but in the harsh, glorious acceptance of the blue pill lie that has been fed to you since birth. You must accept that the family court industry is a profitable extraction racket that strips fathers of their children in over 80% of contested custody cases, not for the safety of the child, but for the transfer of assets. You must accept that the sexual revolution, fueled by female choice without consequence, has led to millions of aborted lives and the atomization of the nuclear family. This is not pessimism. It is the clarity required to navigate a world that wants you dead or docile. Only by swallowing the bitter herb of truth can you purge the poison of deception from your system. We must weaponize the trivium to crush this opposition, turning the liberal arts into a literal weapon for the liberation of the male mind. Grammar gives you the knowledge of the enemy. Learn their definitions and deconstruct their newspeak, understanding that equity is just a fancy word for theft and patriarchy is a slur for competence. Logic allows you to identify the fallacies in their arguments. When a feminist claims the wage gap is due to sexism, you deploy the data to show it is a choice gap rooted in biological time preference and risk aversion. Rhetoric is the final blow, the art of persuading the undecided to see the light, allowing you to speak with such conviction and wit that the leftist narrative crumbles in the public square. The living spirit of Western civilization is not dead. It is merely sleeping in the hearts of men like you, waiting for the alarm of duty to ring. History proves that logic and truth inevitably resurrect themselves from the ashes of lies, but only when men have the courage to wield them. I charge you to stop apologizing for your existence and to pick up the sword of logic, imposing your reality on the world with unshakable confidence. Do not ask for permission to be a man. Do not beg for a seat at the table. Build your own table. Invite whom you please and guard it with the ferocity of a father protecting his legacy. The future belongs to those who can see it, and today you open your eyes. You stand now at the threshold of a new dawn, fully armed with the dialectic weaponry necessary to dismantle the cathedral of lies built by the cultural Marxists. You see the mechanism clearly. The race communism theory is nothing more than a desperate, historically illiterate rebranding of the same old class struggle. designed to turn you against your own neighbors and your own heritage while the elites loot the treasury. You understand that the shit test a woman throws at you over buying the wrong brand of milk is not a random emotional fluctuation, but a biological firmware check for hierarchy and competence. And that failing it by apologizing for your existence is exactly why the modern male is drowning in a sea of blue-pilled supplication. The state does not want your partner to be happy. The state wants to replace you as the provider because a population of dependent, lonely consumers is easier to tax and control than a nation of sovereign patriarchs. The ledger of reality is balanced with cold, hard numbers that the leftist weepers can never erase, no matter how many safe spaces they build. Look at the brutal math of the family court industrial complex, where roughly 70% of divorces are initiated by women. Yet men are stripped of their children and assets with the ruthless efficiency of a Bolshevik commissar seizing the means of production. Recognize the biological absurdity of the gender pay gap myth when you realize that men comprise over 90% of workplace fatalities because we are the ones laying down the pavement and erecting the skyscrapers, not sitting in HR departments filing complaints about microaggressions. You see that the suicide rate for divorced men spikes nearly triple-fold because we have stripped men of their purpose, handing them a participation trophy and a pat on the head instead of a kingdom to build. This is the evil of gynocentrism weaponized by the state, a toxic femininity that demands provision without influence and loyalty without consequence. You have consumed the red pill, and now your duty is to vomit the blue pill of ignorance back into the face of the beast. You must take these lessons of the trivium, the grammar of history, the logic of biology, and the rhetoric of resistance to become the architect of your own reality. Do not seek to adjust your pace to the screeching hysterics of a failing culture. Slow for no one, build for the future, and let the weak fall by the wayside. You are the inheritor of the greatest civilization the known universe has ever seen, the living spirit of the Logos, and it is time to reclaim your throne. Go forth, use this knowledge to shatter the narratives of the wicked, and build a legacy so strong that the enemies of truth will tremble before it. And now the sponsored book introduction, Race Communism Theory, Rewriting History in Bad Faith to Attack America. You look at the ruins of the civilization your forefathers built and feel a ghost pain, a phantom limb ache where your heritage used to be, and you're told that this absence is progress. This is not an accident, it is an expropriation. I have spent years dissecting the rot in the academy, the media, and the corporate boardroom, watching a coordinated effort to geld the modern male and replace the pillars of logic with the quicksand of emotion. They call it equity, they call it diversity, but the proper Aristotelian classification for this ideology is race communism, a worldview designed not to elevate the oppressed, but to demonize the builders, the thinkers, and the protectors. You have been robbed of your history, replaced in your own home, and fed a diet of shame so toxic you are afraid to speak your own name in public. I have stood in the halls of power where these decisions are made, listening to the intellectuals argue that the Western Canon is a tool of oppression, while simultaneously ignoring the 10 million slaves currently suffering in Africa, because acknowledging that reality does not fit their narrative of white villainy. This book is the result of that forensic examination, a cold, hard dismantling of the intersectional DEI reparations racket that holds you hostage for sins you never committed. The history you were taught is a fabrication, a great historical heist designed to strip you of your moral agency. Consider the West African Squadron, a division of the Royal Navy that between 1808 and 1860 dedicated itself to ending the global slave trade. Britain paid a heavy price in blood and treasure to stop an institution that had existed since the dawn of man, yet you are told to hate the Royal Navy and worship the very cultures that ran the Barbary slave trade. For centuries, over 1 million Europeans were enslaved in North Africa, castrated by Middle Eastern slavers and worked to death. Yet this history is memory-holed by a feminized education system that prefers victimhood over truth. Why are the heroes who abolished slavery demonized while the Barbary corsairs and African warlords are given a pass? Because the goal is not justice. The goal is to erode your will to resist. We will expose the hypocrisy of the emotional terrorists who use unfalsifiable claims of systemic racism to extort resources, using syllogistic proof to show that cultural Marxism is a psychological weapon aimed squarely at the nuclear family and the masculine spirit. You are the only moral agent that matters in this equation because you are a net lifetime taxpayer. This is the metric the parasites fear most. While the state extracts your labor to fund the dysfunction of others, you are the one keeping the lights on. I will guide you through the logic that separates harm from offense, proving that taking offense is a choice, while paying the bills is a burden carried solely by men. We will steal the left's arguments and disembowel them with their own inconsistencies, deploying the rhetorical strategies of the Western Canon to humiliate the mob in any debate. There is no point in debating someone whose primary axiom is feelings equal facts. So we must stop debating and start dismantling. We will use the god of logos to smash the idol of feelings, leaving the woke ideologues with nothing but their own tears. This is not about conversation. It is about conquest over the lies that have been woven into your psyche. This text serves as the strategic framework for your exit from Babylon. The current institutions are beyond repair. They are terminally infected with the genocentric virus that prioritizes feelings over facts. You cannot vote your way out of a system that despises your existence. Therefore, we must build the New Jerusalem, a parallel structure built on Bitcoin, gig work, and new media free from the corruption of the legacy press and the academic monopoly. We are going to resurrect the virtues of the past: stoicism, strength, honor, to forge a futuristic singularity of free men. This is the path to the golden age, but it requires you to stop apologizing and start building. You must leverage your economic power and reclaim your agency, refusing to fund a system that views you as a beast of burden to be milked and discarded. The future belongs to those who have the courage to seize it, and I am handing you the blueprint for that conquest. Before we proceed, a necessary filter for the faint of heart. If you are a creature of the woke mob, if your identity is wrapped up in the flag of victimhood, or if you believe that feelings are a valid substitute for empirical data, put this book down immediately. You will not find comfort here. You will find only the terrifying clarity of a mirror reflecting your own inadequacy. If you are a male feminist seeking a pat on the head from the matriarchy, go back to your safe space. This work is not for you. It is for the men who have been betrayed, run over, and lied to. The men who are desperate for the traditions of Western civilization and the raw masculine power to enforce them. If you are looking for validation of your persecution complex, look elsewhere. This book is a weapon for those ready to wield it. For the man who recognizes the cage constructed around him, reading this is not optional. It is essential for your survival. You will learn to identify the bedrock of lies beneath your feet and navigate the web of intersectional delusion without getting stuck. You will understand the code of the New Jerusalem and how to apply it to your daily life to achieve sovereignty. This is your manual for the test of vital force, the crucible that will separate the wheat from the chaff. By the time you turn the final page, you will possess the rhetorical arsenal to crush the parasitic elite and the psychological armor to deflect their guilt trips. Do not read this if you want to remain comfortable. Read this if you want to be dangerous. The dawn of the masculine singularity is here, and you are either part of the rising empire or the dust beneath its boots. Choose wisely. Race Communism Theory, Rewriting History in Bad Faith to Attack America. Written by Conrad Riker. Buy now. Links in description.